Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwank. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today, Walt, we are doing something we semi-swore that we would never do. I don't know if we officially put our hands on a Bible or anything, but I think we said at a certain point we're probably never going to go back to Dark Side of the Ring. But here we are. We're back for a three-part Dark Side episode. If you still watch the show, then you know that we are talking about one of the, I guess, the bigger episodes in recent memory. Certainly, again, quantity-wise, and certainly quality-wise, even. I'm talking about Jeff Jarrett and the battle for TNA parts 1 through 3, Walt.
Yeah, at this point in our, I guess, catalog or our recording uh, schedule, I think we can always bank on at least, or at most, one around. Let's just call it one good topic from every new season of Dark Side. It feels
Yeah.
like because it seems like they really invested a lot of time and effort into this one. Um, and as a result, there's definitely certainly more meat on this topic than say like Samoa Joe versus uh there's
Necro
another last
Butcher?
Necro
Is
Butcher.
that
It's
the
like
last time
another
we talked about Darkseid? I was going to look that up. It might be, right?
no. Well, I think that's a new episode this season. It's like
Oh, okay.
it feels like a pretty light, like thin topic to for podcast fodder. But like I just at this point with Dark Side, it just feels like every season gives us one of these where it's like, okay, let's revisit because when are we going to talk about Jeff Jarrett specifically in this way again?
Yep.
So
The last time we talked about Darkseid was 2023. It was the Candido Sunny episode, if you remember that one.
wow, we covered that.
Yeah, I think like, I was gonna say not to give away our trade secrets, but I think it's a matter of what are we gonna do this next episode? I have no idea. What's on Dark Side? Oh, we haven't talked about XYZ. Let's do that. I think that is usually our process, right? Like it's there in a pinch when
Yeah,
we need it with a for some topic or other that we haven't talked about otherwise. So it's nice to turn to it in those scenarios.
that is how the sausage is made. But I literally just but based on what you just said about covering Sonny and Candido, I guess that's not necessarily a thin topic because Sonny is. But anyway, so we're talking about TNA in this case, and Jeff Jarrett, and there was a lot of Jeff Jarrett in this.
There
So
was. You made the case when we were chatting about it beforehand that it definitely felt like a Jeff Jarrett episode featuring TNA, which is fair, I guess. Obviously Jeff was intimately involved and is the focal point of all of this, so it makes sense to put him front and center and then sort of have TNA floating around in the ether. But along those lines, well, like you said, we haven't really talked about TNA ever. It's at least certainly not, specifically about that. What is your history with TNA? Because my history is zero, and I know you have a little bit more in a background. We've hinted at it and joked about it over the years. What's your what is your history with this particular brand slash promotion?
well, after college, I moved in with a friend of the show. I don't know if he actually listens to the show. Dutch Boy, as cited as our TNA resident TNA expert, which is hilarious because I don't think he watched any second of TNA beyond what I'm about to recite here. But
I feel like last time I
there,
saw him, we talked about this, and he was like, "I didn't actually watch TNA very much."
no, definitely not. But now he's just like the resident expert, mostly because he watched like in an 18-month span pretty religiously with me. But we did start watching just to fill just dead time in our lives together in Bethesda, Maryland. Uh, we watched the Impact Zone and leading up to the Bischoff Hogan era, and then we kept watching the Bischoff Hogan era, and then within like a few months realized that this was going nowhere, and then stopped. But there was a stretch before the Bischoff Hogan era where they were really hitting their stride with the roster, and they talk about it in the stock, which is we can dissect more of. But like that's pretty much my limited history of TNA. That and then whatever the hell collaboration happened with AEW a few years ago,
Yep,
and then
that's all. Like
that's
you
it.
said, I have we talked about the Samoa Joe three way, or have we just batted that around? Because that's the one match. I mean, I
We've
feel
talked
like
about it.
we never did it though. Yeah, I just looked up. We never did that either. But yeah, That's the one team. I mean, we honestly, spoiler for the next episode, we will probably will do that as our watch along because
Well,
what to stay in the TNA mode of things. But that's certainly the extent of my knowledge as well. Is that that's where Joe did so well, and obviously AJ got started. Daniels had a big run there. Just various X Division guys that popped in and out, and then of course they hired a bunch of old guys, and it all went to shit. But the constant certainly is Jeff Jarrett in terms of he started it and he was the face of it, even when he probably shouldn't have been the face of a national wrestling promotion. Like, was he ever a big enough deal to be that? Like, so the question everybody asks at the end of WCW too is, what role did he play? Certainly not an outsized role, but like when a guy like him becomes your champ and you're one of your top guys, are you in trouble as a promotion? Fortunately, TNA never had to worry about that too much because they were never big enough for it to really matter. But this is the first time I ever really thought about it more than sort of like a cursory, well, that's not going to work thing. Like it's the first time I ever really thought about Jeff Jarrett in the context of his place in history of wrestling and his place in modern wrestling and just his everything about him because for his flaws and for his, I would say, sort of permanent stature of never being a top guy, he has been around for so long. Like this 3-part little series on TNA was just a reminder of like how much this guy has seen from start to finish. It's crazy.
yeah, it's this episode is very much to to me it floats between two different um, entities. It's Jeff Jarrett, the wrestler, and Jeff Jarrett, the promoter. And if you really break it down, I had to think about this and look at Wikipedia pages, which it sounds even outdated saying that out loud as a form of like research. But like, I'm just like, TNA has lasted longer than WCW, not Nitro, WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Like WCW was 13 years or something like that, and TNA has been like 23 years.
Wow, is
So
that true? I guess
the
so.
fact that
Yeah. Wow.
it started right after the purchase of WCW, like 2002
Yeah.
or 2003, I believe. And so it's still around. And so by that function, it's like that's lasted longer than ECW, that's lasted longer than WCW, that lasted longer than a lot of promotions. And so you kind of have to. I mean, I obviously like enough billionaires bail you out. Like you can be in the wrestling game in perpetuity.
And it's just a series of letters at a certain point. It is not indicative of, any sort of continuity within the company or anything like that, besides Jeff Jarrett. But yeah, like everyone else has come and gone. It's not necessarily, but still, like you said, like they could have propped up, many companies could have been propped up in that way and they haven't been. Like TNA does have the record breaking, not record breaking, but like I guess in terms of being a consistent alternative, like they stood the test of time in a very, small but notable way.
But that is also it's kind of to its detriment too, because Jeff Jarrett was the head promoter of this thing. That objectively is successful because it's still in business and it still has TV deals, it still does pay per view, still has an audience after all these years and all these changing of the guards and financial backers. But because Jeff Jarrett, the promoter, was there for so long, and just like I kind of view a lot of these old ex WWE guys or people who went and did short stints, like Christian is a good example of this. In TNA, Jeff Jarrett, the wrestler, has always been in TNA for the most part of the last 30 years since the WCW got sold, and it's just a black hole to me of like
Mm-hmm.
what this guy has done. Did he win 2 TNA titles? Did he win 50? Like, I don't know. Like, somewhere in between those two things. Like, and you could say the same thing about Christian. Like, Christian had a WWE career, then left for many years and came back to WWE. And I only remember really the WWE parts, pieces of it. But he was like the face of TNA for a long time. Same with Kurt Angle. Like, Kurt Angle, I feel like, is less of a black hole to me because I was watching a little bit during that time when he was like the face of their company. But yeah, I mean, I only really remember the WWE stuff, so it's great that it's been in business for a long time. But like performer wise, like it's still kind of, even though it was quote unquote number two, I don't really have visibility on it, so it kind of just exists in the shadows in many ways over the last 20, 30 years
It's like your famous
to
catchphrase. What
me.
the hell was going on Tuesday nights, right? Didn't they air on Tuesday?
Well, there were Fridays, and there were Tuesdays, and there
Friday.
were Thursdays, and there
So
were
it's the
Fridays.
original what the hell is going on Friday nights. But you weren't asking it out of like frustration with the products like you would for WWE. You were literally asking what the hell is going on Friday nights. I don't know. I have no idea. Please tell me.
Yeah, and I still don't know.
Well, that's you get into something that is a I guess an issue with this three-part series. And again, they put the onus on Jarrett. They make Jarrett the everything. He's the main talking head. It's about him more than anything. But in terms of actual TNA knowledge, there's not a ton you learn from watching this. Like I
Hmm.
definitely feel like I went into it knowing what you know, and I came out knowing what I knew previously. Like there's a lot of they there are moments where they'll just say business was booming or we really started to hit our stride, and they cite nothing, and they reveal no, not that they need to like pull up spreadsheets with data and numbers and revenue, but how do I know that's true? Like they skip over like years by just saying like we were finding our footing or business was getting better, and like it's just they move forward through the company and the history of the company in such a way that just is an excuse to get to the next main hiring or main event that happened. Like, brought this guy in, started this storyline. Stuff with Kurt happened. Stuff with Jeff happened. Stuff with Hogan happened. Like, but there's so that's so it's so scarce on specifics, and I just would like to know, like, the $10 pay-per-view idea. That was a crazy idea. Like, did that work at all? Like, were there any successes? What did they deem success when they were on TV? What did they actually get good ratings? Like they say they were getting good, but good compared to what? Good compared to cable shows overall, good compared to WWE. Like there's just no sense of scale or success scope or anything like that. And again, I don't need it to spell everything out in painstaking detail, but I would have liked to learn what their piece of the pie really was, as opposed to just quick anecdotes about we were doing great. Of course, you're just saying that because Jeff Jarrett's the main guy, and you don't want to say it sucked or was treading water, or barely holding on for 10 years. So I just wish they'd gotten a little more in the weeds on what this company actually was and how close they ever came to profitability, success, or anything like that.
Yeah, and living through AEW for the last however many years, 7-ish years, like it's pretty evident like what the ratings are, what their success really is, the TV deals. Obviously they're backed by one money mark, so to speak, but like but it's also very visible as to what their success looks like and is. And yeah, you're right. I mean, TNA, what is success? I mean, just because like no one would sit here and say AEW isn't successful. They are making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars
Mm-hmm.
potentially, and it's like I don't know if TNA made $100 million in its 30 years. Like maybe I don't know. It does beg a lot of questions, and I also think that like this topic, after watching this, I would sit down and watch like I don't want to say an anthology series, but like a 5-6 part series of the different eras because it seems like they've had a lot of different eras like that get touched upon here. Like the Hogan Bischoff era could be its own hour-long special, just dissecting like what the hell, like changing the six-sided ring to the four-sided ring, and it goes well beyond just what was Jeff Jarrett's involvement in this because like that's such a small piece to it, and they did a lot of things. They elevated RVD and like Jeff Hardy in a way that like WWE like did for a second and then stopped. And so, like, I mean, there's a lot of major main players in that time that like really contributed to their success beyond like you know Hogan, Bischoff, and Dixie Carter. Like, so yeah, I mean, there's so much to explore, and sadly, this was not the avenue to really explore it. It was very top level and kind of glazed by a lot of that.
But I will say, when we now once I was literally saying this while you were talking, I was also looking up like, there must be a TNA book out there. Like we must have just missed this somehow. Do you know about the new TNA book that came out about a month ago?
Nope.
There is a TNA book. We have to add it to our list. It's called Total Nonstop Agony. Can you guess who the author of this book is?
What's his
ECW
name?
Press.
Is it
Not Keith Ellie
Kenny
Greenberg.
Casanova? Kenny Casanova?
No, it's not Kenny Casanova. That would be great.
Guy Evans?
No, it's someone with a first-hand knowledge of the product.
Am I gonna guess it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's Vince Russo.
Oh,
So Vince Russo
Okay,
wrote a
cool.
firsthand account of his time with TNA, again called Total Nonstop Agony. The cover is Vince Russo looking cool, and then Hogan off to one side and Bischoff off to the other. So Jarrett not even on the cover of the book. Just his
Hmm.
head writer and two guys who came in seemingly like 5 years in and burned out in like a year or two. So, and it's only 264 pages long. So that actually makes me intrigued to read this pretty soon because I'm like, okay, do I want to read Russo's version? Not particularly. Will it have juicy stories? Probably. Is it short and reasonable? Yes. So, I mean, that bumps it quickly up the list to you know, I think consumable and worth doing on the show.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought up Russo because uh, I forgot how much he was involved in TNA, and I also never really put together just like how close he was with Jeff Jarrett too,
The
because
blurb of this
if
book says the demise of his friendship with his best friend, wrestling superstar Jeff Jarrett. So
yeah,
they're at least claiming him as best friend. I mean, they might throw that term. That just might just mean good pal. But you know, I'm seeing the big BF words there. So
but they don't go into that their
they don't.
downfall in this TNA piece
I
or
mean, I guess they
the
go into like, you know, Jeff's fracturing with the company, but they certainly blame it more on Dixie, right? At that point, if there is, if there when the disconnect does seem to arise, mostly it seems like everybody is just Dixie playing people against each other and being maybe out of her depth and just sort of a lot of the mistakes that were made, they certainly know where to put them back on her. So
yeah, and I can see why she wouldn't want to do an interview for this
yeah,
piece.
why the fuck does she care? You ran a, like you said, she ran a company to the ground and then it has survived despite her. Like she certainly, whether it was her fault or not, which is debatable, you know, just in that I don't know a ton about it. I'm not going to believe the talking heads on a documentary with 100% accuracy, but certainly it's hard to ignore that the company has stood the test of time even though she's been gone, and she does seem just like the prototypical money mark, you know, like if that term was ever used for anybody in recent memory, she seems to be the top candidate to have it hung from her neck.
Yeah, I don't think I don't get the sense she had the same level of respect from her wrestling roster than Tony Khan does.
And Kia
Um,
Stevens of Glow fame, who I think is great in this, you know, and I loved hearing from her. And you know, I'm glad they touched on her time with TNA and the knockouts and all that. She makes the great point that, like, obviously being a woman boss in wrestling must be hard as fuck. So I have sympathy for Dixie in that regard. That I imagine even the most capable wrestling savvy woman in that position is going to have a hard time, if not an impossible time, in maintaining respect and running the company, especially 20 years ago. You know, so that's a rock and a hard place for sure. But then you're like, but she also brought in Hogan and Bischoff, so like any sympathy I might have for her goes out the window when I hear and see the horrible choices she made with her company.
yeah, and they kind of highlighted on a few moments too, where it's when Hogan was leaving and she was like on her hands and knees begging him
Oh
to
my
stay.
god, that was so
Uh,
bad. I was. Ugh. That's the last. Like I've never seen
yeah,
that before. I knew so. I was also very sad. I was watching this. I was like, God, we have to talk about Terry again. Fortunately, we don't really have to talk about Terry too much, but
he didn't really
seeing
do a whole
that
lot, did he?
no, and seeing his low lights, I'm just like, this looks so sad. Like, what I'm so happy I know so little about this, and I think it's funny that it never got touched on in obviously the many part Hogan show we just watched because it just makes him look like such a sad piece of shit. You know, like it makes him look like such a failure, and it was never gonna work. So I mean, I don't blame him for taking the checks they wrote him, but it's just like, man, you really thought you had juice left, and you had negative juice at that point. You know, you had nothing going for you. Nobody cared and you just all made fools of yourselves. It looks like over and over again for a year or so, and then they went away.
Yeah, I mean, but Dixie, because like there's one thing to be like, okay, Hogan has control, we can't write him off. But the other thing to write him off in a way that makes your entire company look like clown shoes. I'm like,
Yeah, and then
yeah,
he
that
never comes back. He never does the job. He never like he just leaves, and that's that's the end of the story.
he leaves looking down on TNA. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
he
cool.
looks
How did the
better, even though it was his fault largely that things went so wrong.
yeah. I mean, clearly he was just like a cheerleader, right? He was just a glorified cheerleader, but like then don't listen to him when it
And a
comes to
checkbook
booking decisions.
for his buddies, right? Like he got the Nasty Boys jobs. Like he seems like he got a bunch of losers who didn't deserve jobs. Hall and Nash, as much as I love Hall and Nash in so many contexts. That's a great story in this in the doc too. Is when Nash's contract was coming up, and they said they saw him by the bar pouring Dixie wine, saying like how they were going to take over and run the business, and you're just like knowing Nash, you're just like you're like it's just it makes you laugh. It makes you laugh even though you're I'm so disgusted by it because I'm like fucking Nash, man. Like guy just wants a big paycheck. Like it's openly all he wants is just a very large paycheck, and just to hear him manipulating people just to get that paycheck with no aims or goals beyond that, I'm like God, getting played by him. I understand it, and I'm also like, come on, Kevin, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were getting paychecks from Dixie Carter well before Hulk Hogan and
Okay,
Eric Bischoff. So I feel like they kind of like pretended like some of those hires in old
interesting.
WWE
Okay,
guys were because the sorry, little TNA
yeah, there you go. See, look at all that TNA knowledge
history
you have.
lesson. The main event mafia, I believe they were called, was like a bunch of those guys like Hall, Nash, Angle, Sting at one point.
So it was truly just like the
Uh,
veteran stars, basically. But
yeah, yeah.
They weren't all Hogan lapdogs. A lot of them were just Hogan affiliated by dint of being in the business for years.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I'm sure the Nasty Boys were a Hogan hire because
Yeah, I
but
mean,
I don't remember them to be
uh,
honest.
but they might have had jobs for a month. You know, I shouldn't act like they were. But the fact they had jobs for a second is a damnation on the company. It's a black eye on the company. She hiring the 50-year-old Nasty Boys and expecting them to draw a dime is just very silly.
I mean, could they even wrestle at that point in time? Like,
They looked fat. I mean, a lot of
were they
fat
even?
wrestlers, but fat and old and already pretty bad before you get to be either is not a good, situation.
Then again, I mean, we read Mick Foley's like fourth biography all about his TNA run, and I'm like, yeah, they were kind of doing this shtick with the older wrestlers like well before this, where Mick Foley won the title at one point. So, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but they certainly made a lot of mistakes.
But you're right though, and that's a good thing to remember. And again, I contradicted myself by even saying that. Like the documentary certainly seems to play fast and loose with time,
Yeah.
and might move things around to suit its points. Where who knows? We can't. You definitely cannot say walking out of this like, oh, their high point was 2007 to 2009, and they were down from 2000. Like, there's no way you could possibly infer any of that from the episodes. Like all you know is that they were fledgling and doing their best, and they did develop. And the one thing that certainly seems to be true across the board is they developed some homegrown stars, or at least they nurtured independent stars into being like legitimate wrestlers, and then eventually eclipsed them by hiring people who were more well known who didn't have the same level of intrigue and enthusiasm among the fan base, and that was one of the things that kept them from ever really getting too big. Is they just kept shooting themselves in the foot over and over again by bringing in washed up people and expecting them to somehow leap to a higher rating level, a higher interest level, and that just never happened.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel like that's the thing that possibly AW learned from. Like, don't just keep bringing in WWE talent and putting them on top of the car. Like they did at certain times and they did strategically, but they
Yeah,
also are not like MJF is not in the middle of the card in favor of Cope. It's the other
Hangman,
way around.
like Hangman was he was
Yeah.
not a nobody, but he certainly became a mainstream wrestling star because of them. I have that in my notes too. I was like, the only guys they really hired that I would argue, and I might be missing somebody, but that were like stars already, and they just sort of used them in those, are Brian and Edge. And I guess like Christian sort of, but even Christian was never really that
Mhm.
big. Like otherwise, it was mid card guys that they sort of made into main eventers. Moxley, like already was. They certainly made him into a way bigger star. Like almost always, they took someone who was at a certain level at WWE and raised them up a level. Like rarely do they bring someone and have them be parallel or or just ride their coattails. Like it was, they all seemed relatively strategic. And like you said, they didn't hire like a Goldberg. They didn't hire anyone for like a short term boost that wouldn't have gone anywhere. It was a lot of like pretty smart hires of people that still had some juice left and some longevity and some something to give to the company.
Yeah, and they're finding their footing and they're finding their place in the ecosystem because like they're excited to just wrestle again and maybe that was the case at TNA as well, but I feel like when they go through like the murderer's row of just like guy who's collecting another paycheck just because they were a name in WWE. Like, I don't think any of those guys were just quote unquote excited to just wrestle again. Maybe Kurt Angle,
Yeah.
I would say, maybe.
But even
Um,
then, when I see Kurt Angle come on screen, and like he's obviously, it sounds like he had a little bit of a run there, but in my head, I was like, I think I even put this in my notes. I was like, why did Kurt Angle become a free agent again? Like, there's no way they would let him go. And it's not like he got outbid. Like, there's no way they won the bidding war. And then they get into his drug issues, and I was like, oh, and his broken neck, and I was like, oh yeah, like he was released, he was let
yeah,
go, and they brought him in, and he maybe didn't go into full blown addiction yet, or wasn't got more and more injured over time. But they even then, like Scott Steiner and guys like that, Nash and Hall, obviously, like these are almost everyone's best days were behind them. Like I don't think there's a single person they showed me that they brought them in as a free agent. And you're like, oh, they got them at their peak. Like it was always somebody on the decline.
maybe Kennedy or
Well, I
Anderson
mean,
or
I don't
whatever it is.
know.
But
Was
but
there ever
obviously
a peak?
doesn't.
I guess is the question there. Was that ever a
Well, that's
person who
true.
mattered?
No, but I mean, I remember when they first got him, it was a big deal because he was still youngish, and
Hmm.
WWE, he was like ostracized WWE because like Randy Orton like took a weird bump from him once or something. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like he was just like excommunicated because of Randy Orton being Randy Orton in like the mid 2000s or whatever.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I'm sure there's other examples too. To be perfectly honest, it's just like, but like, back to my what I was saying earlier, it's like
Hmm.
TNA became a bit of a black hole. There is an audience, and there are people who did watch, and I was one of them for like a few months. But like ultimately, whatever happened with these people during that time, this company feels like lost memories to me. So
Yep. And the constant was Jarrett, obviously, and we can loop back to him because he's the star of the show.
yeah,
And he seems like a good guy. Like he certainly is someone who objectively came through the wrestling world and came out the other ends, survived, was addicted to, was an alcoholic, and certainly has the bumps and bruises of and the psychic scars of a lifetime in the wrestling business. And seems like he has emerged now as a what seems like a pretty decent person. I suppose he could be a piece of shit behind the scenes, but I get he certainly gives off good guy energy. And
yeah,
that's good to see. Like as again, someone who didn't know much about him, besides that he was always in TNA and always was on the periphery of stardom. Like it was nice to see that he seems like a good dude, and like that he, for all of his I don't want to say flaws, but like for his the things that sort of dinged him and made him never be like a super duper star, it's nice to see that he like he got to do like sort of hinted got to do things that a lot of guys aren't able to do, and even if he wasn't the best promoter in the world or the best booker in the world, like he had a company that he has shepherded into being for decades now. Like there is just it's a very good story, and it's worthy of multiple part episode of TV show.
yeah, and obviously, it's not obvious. I didn't know much about his wife because I heard about the Karen Angle stuff, and I, I admittedly until I watched this, I wasn't sure if that was like a joke or not, or if it was a storyline or not. And it was, and it turns out it was a storyline. It was just hit a little too close to home.
Yeah, a
And
really shitty storyline. I guess that's mixed. Some people said it was good, so at one point, but I don't know. It was a weird storyline for sure.
certainly blurred reality. But
As
I didn't
Russo
know his wife.
loves.
Yeah, I didn't know his wife had died. I didn't know he had his drinking problems and stuff like that. You know, really made him feel very sympathetic,
Yep.
even though obviously that's just one piece of it. But
The wife dying is very. I mean, there's the part which I really didn't expect is Scott Steiner is discussing, Jeff Jarrett's pre Karen Jarrett wife, and starts breaking down and has to like leave, the camera. And that was very. I didn't
yeah,
expect Scott Steiner to cry. So obviously people love Jeff's wife, and they, and Jarrett obviously cries and gets extremely emotional. Talking, and that story, like I teared up too. I was like, well, that's so like. It's a very beautiful story. Like leaving three kids behind is so sad, but like the way she obviously fought, like it is you can see how that kind of thing, even outside of wrestling, certainly outside of wrestling, would cripple a person emotionally. And then tuck 30 years of getting the shit beat out of you and the injuries and everything. Like it's amazing that he is still alive given all of that. You think it would just wore him down to a nub.
yeah, and it also kind of makes sense why, even though it was like his top wrestler's ex-wife, like why they found each other. It's like it makes that story a little bit more understandable in some way, where it's like, oh well, he's grieving and he's yeah, he's lonely and he found like comfort in this new person that like filled the void of his lost wife. I'm like, yeah, it's hard to really like say what a piece of shit.
And
Like, okay, I mean, I guess I get
Espe-
it now, but
Especially since Jared, Karen angled, eventually Jared, her husband was a pill addict and, seemed like he was in a very dark and awful place himself. And she was disgusted with him and ready to move on. So it's like,
yeah,
it's one of those things where you said the reputation, and because of the storyline and the way they present it, because it's just stupid wrestling, that's the one thing that's always seems true from the Pritchard podcast and all that, that whole world is wrestlers are the biggest gossips and the biggest, uh, whisperers, secret or whisperers in the world. And so I'm not surprised that they turned this, thing, which is certainly, let's say, unconventional, or at least like not what you expected. Like it does seem on its head like it might be troublesome, but then you learn about it for 5 seconds. You go, it's like this timeline makes perfect sense. That these people all like I understand where they all were, like no big deal. And then of course they make it into a big deal through,
right,
whispering, through blurring the lines between storyline and reality. Like it becomes this whole thing when in reality, like I said, it's just people like everyone was very sad, and then most of them, hopefully, I think Kurt eventually did, but they find people that makes them happy. Like that, hard to get too upset about that.
yeah. They weren't too secretive though. I mean, they told that story how like Dixie was invited to a party they were hosting, and Dixie didn't know. And again, this is like one side of the
But
story.
then
Maybe
Dixie throws like a little shit fit because she didn't know, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So
So she made it a big
what were they
deal.
hiding? What were they hiding exactly? It's two consenting adults, and to, So anyway,
Yeah.
uh, I'm curious if there's what, if anything, that you saw that you were like, I want to know more about that particular moment or that particular time frame or
I mean,
about.
I really just like that's the thing that makes me want to read this Russo book is like I do want to know, and Russo is probably not the most trustworthy objective source either, but I just want to know the only real moment we got in the whole thing was the Sting Jeff Hardy thing at Victory Road, whatever that was, like which is like
Mhm.
the TNA moment you hear about in all these things is when Jeff was too messed up to perform. And I'm like, man, like I wish there was just more than that, like for a company that's been around this long there must have been a triumphant moment. Like, and obviously, there's the three-way match with Daniels and AJ and Samoa Joe, which we'll cover probably pretty soon. But there must be something else that is worth discussing. And it's just frustrating that they don't even get into anything that was like we put on this great main event and it was so nice and we started to really get our that means we got our legs under us. Like I just want to read some more semi-objective versions of like when TNA had a peak to go with the valleys we already know about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many more errors of TNA because with 20 some years, like you have to have errors. Just the same way, like you could point to the 90s WWF and be like, oh yeah, that 93 was a completely different era from 94 even or 95. It's like things change so quickly that it is worth kind of dissecting. Like, I mean, just the Hardys being in this, and we didn't talk about Brother Nero and the cinematic matches at all. Like, they started that whole revolution. So
That's true.
I would argue that's a huge piece of their history that like put them back on the map when they were completely forgotten for a long period of time. So yeah,
Well,
lot of left to uncover.
yeah, and like I said, I think this now that we're chatting about this and we watch this, I think it's time to do more TNA, right? I think we need to invest ourselves further, put on our wrestling historian hats, and dig into the ins and outs of TNA a little bit, starting with maybe a watch along, and then perhaps Vince Russo book. What do you say, Walt? Should we commit to Vince Russo book right now? Are we doing TNA month? Are we doing TNA August to Total Nonstop August?
Wow. You're really putting my feet to the fire here.
But it would
But
also drag into September because obviously there's only one more episode in August, I think. But
I was gonna say too, like because this episode played more like Jared, I almost kind of want to do a Jared watch along
oh well, we could do that too.
and then a
We could do total
TNA.
nonstop September then. Total non-September
Total
action.
non-September and September.
That's right. We'll
Total
figure out.
non-August.
We'll figure out the. I think you're right. We should do Jared first, and then maybe we'll do more TNA stuff. So I think at some point we will absolutely cover Vince Russo book, and I do want to watch that three-way. But you're right, we probably should do a Jeff Jarrett match because this is the Jeff Jarrett show. So I think that's fair. I cannot think of a Jeff Jarrett match worth doing, but I
I've
guess
got one.
that's when we'll put our historian hats on and we'll find a Jeff Jarrett match that is worth watching from the TNA run, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be a Slapnuts era Jarrett match, but
No, I want
I've
to
got one in
do.
mind.
I want Mr. TNA. I want a TNA title match at one of their shitty pay-per-views.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to
I
be a
got
title
it.
match. I think we got to do it. We got to do a TNA Jarrett. We're not. I'm not doing a WWE Intercontinental title match or anything.
You want to watch him versus Michaels in like what is arguably his best match?
Kind of, I do, I guess. But if I actually want something
Yeah,
good,
we'll
I
book
think
this up. We'll
if we're
book
doing
this up.
total nonstop August parentheses Jeff Jarrett month end parentheses, we need to do a Jeff Jarrett match from TNA.
Well, I'll have to consult Dutch Boy
All
for
right.
Jarrett's finest match,
he will
circa
say, he will say, "What are
2008.
you texting about? I do not know. Please stop asking me very sparing TNA questions, very
Yeah,
sporadic TNA queries."
yeah. Well, stop. You ask me more about TNA than you do my kids. What is happening here?
Well, it's you, so that might be vaguely understandable, but yeah.
Sure.
Well, we'll be back then in a few weeks with, I guess, a Jeff Jarrett match to be determined. So keep an eye, refresh those feeds, and keep an eye out because who knows what it'll be. It'll probably be Jeff oriented in some way, but who knows what Jeff. We'll figure that out amongst ourselves and we'll bring that to you all. But for now, if you want more awesome truth, you can find our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. If you want new episodes and old ones, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are delivered. We are there. Well, thanks for cracking open the TNA chest with me. It'll be very exciting. We're committed now to months and months of TNA, so the fun will never stop. The content is there. We're gonna go dig deep into this well and find out more about our favorite promotion, TNA.
Also, I enjoy this whole like the end of every episode for 5 minutes. We just talk about what we're gonna do next and just book, schedule our show
Hey,
live.
better do it now than later, right? Better get it out there for the fans so they can follow along with us.
Yeah, so that when we completely pivot, it'll be like, what the hell?
It'll be a swerve, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.